Hey guys, this is John, and welcome to another standard video. I'm playing Psychomat or Psychomet. They open with e4. Okay, so I've had some requests for a Scandinavian defense, and of course, I don't need any convincing to play the Scandi, so let's go for it with Queen takes d5 and Queen a5. This is the line I've been playing the last couple of years. Those of you who have looked at my courses on Chessable will know that I have a Queen d8 course, and I've advocated that in the past as well. It's just a simple option. The Scandinavian is not for everyone, but I do think it makes sense as a relatively straightforward response to e4, probably one of the cleanest responses you can get. And if you're not a pure beginner and you want something solid, I would think about looking into it. Okay, so d4 here. I'm going to go bishop f5. So the Queen a5 Scandi is actually the line that I grew up playing. It's the first variation I came to learn in the Scandinavian defense. And I broadened my Scandinavian horizons from there into stuff like the Queen d8 variation, even the modern Scandinavian with 2 knight f6. So lately, past couple years, I've been revisiting this line, which used to have some theoretical problems, in my opinion, but it's been a bit revised, a bit reevaluated because of this plan of e6 and bishop b4, delaying c6, which previously was the norm, to play c6 early on to give the queen a window back to c7 or d8. Now, it looks like in this game, we're going to be in somewhat independent territory early on. I mean, this move is played, but I don't think it's the strongest. Bishop d3. Nevertheless, it's a natural move, so we have to respect it. I'm thinking maybe play c6 now because it would be nice to wait for a moment to see if white will take. If white plays bishop d2, then I can inflict some pawn structure damage on them. So c6, bishop d2, then I can take, and white has these double isolated d-pawns. So I'm thinking about that. I'm also thinking about just taking. Certainly a reasonable move. Let's go with the c6 move, though. Maybe one thing I have to watch out for, though, is b4. I'm just realizing. c6, b4, queen takes b4, bishop takes f5, queen takes c3 check. There is bishop d2. Okay, so if I want to do this delayed option where I'm trying to get white to take me on f5, I should probably play e6 here, actually, to do it. So I could play it. Yeah, it's interesting. Let's go for it. Let's play e6. Pre-move the capture here. So now I control b4 sufficiently, so upon b4 I can take with my bishop. It's no problem. It might be interesting for white to take on f5 and then play knight e5. That's sometimes an option for white, trying to even look for g4. I think in that case I'd actually play h5 and try to clamp the g4 square with my pawn. Let's see what white does. White just castles, reasonable. And now I'll probably develop this knight. Knight bd7, look to influence the square. Very likely the approach. I think my queen's fine for now. This is the thing about the Scandinavian. You have your queen out here sometimes. If you're playing the queen takes d5 variation, you have to be vigilant of ways they could take advantage of that, but I don't see a way for white. Rook e1, lining up with my king. Bishop d6 comes to mind, guarding e5. Could also just play c6 here. Solid move. c6, knight e5, though. And if I play knight takes e5, there is rook takes e5, hitting my queen. So I kind of prefer this bishop d6 move, the look of the bishop d6 move. And if d5, maybe e5 at that point. I think that would be reasonable. Yeah, and this is somewhat offbeat territory for me. I think normally bishop takes d3 is what I would go for. Way back on move number 6, when white played bishop d3. But I'm kind of experimenting. Queen out here on f5. So we're in some slightly new territory for my purposes as well. Hope everyone is having a good week. It's been a tiring one for me. I've had a lot of work. I'm just kind of gutting it out. One of these days where I didn't get a ton of sleep, but I wanted to make a video. So I'm eager to see what happens in this game. Queen e2. Okay, so maybe white's gearing up for knight e4 with a possible trade in the center. Don't know that there's too many other purposes to this move. I guess knight b5 is a thing, so maybe I should play c6. Just firm things up in the middle of the board. Yeah, probably white's looking for knight e5, knight e4, or knight b5. Trying to assist the knight. Actually, of all these, if I had to guess, probably knight e5 is what white is looking to do. So if that is the case, how do I feel about castling here? Castling, knight e5. Let's say bishop takes e5, since if I take the other way, I would run into a fork. So bishop takes e5, d takes e5, and then knight moving somewhere. Knight g4 hits the pawn on e5. White could play f4. Looks a little overextended for them, but probably nothing special. Maybe knight d5 is what I would do. Yeah, I think knight d5 should be fine. I think I'm going to castle here. Castle short. I don't see a major reason to castle long, especially with knight b5 in the air, which would hit the bishop and the pawn on a7. Possibly that was playable as well, but I like castling short. Looks nice and easy here. So let's do it. So white's been playing very fast. We are getting into the middle game now. And the decisions are going to be tougher, I would think. Yeah, knight e5, bishop takes e5. It is hard to play around a knight like that. Possibly I can think about c5 as well. Knight e5, c5. Undermining move, although it looks a little loose as my bishop becomes undefended, but I'm considering it. But as of now, knight e5, bishop takes e5, d takes e5, knight d5 is the direction I'm thinking of. And to extend that line, let's say knight takes d5, e takes d5, e6, looking for a mass swap. I did see that I have this potentially nice move, rook a to e8 at that point. But then white has e7. Okay, so maybe I should play rook f to e8 instead if we get that far. Rook f to e8. Yeah, and I'm thinking of using the pin down the file here to try to avoid too much simplification. Okay, and this might happen. Knight e5 played. All right, so do I take that knight? And if I take it, I got to take it with the bishop. Because again, if I take with the knight first, I run into this typical fork. D takes e5, forking the knight and the bishop. Remember, minor pieces that are one square apart on the same rank. So in this case, the knight on f6 and the bishop on d6, they are susceptible to a pawn fork. You always got to watch that motif. So I don't think I have any tricks there if that were to occur. So bishop takes e5, d takes e5. Initially, I was liking knight g4, but then after f4, white supports the pawn, and I feel like the knight on g4 isn't so well placed. So I'm leaning towards this direction, playing the knight to d5. Absolutely normal square in the Scandi. There's some vague like queen b5 stuff I might have to look at, but I don't think that's ever a concern. I can play knight on d7 to b6. So bishop takes e5, d takes e5, knight d5. Knight takes d5, pawn takes d5. And that's a bishop versus knight middle game. I like the fact that the e5 pawn is kind of blocking white's dark square bishop. I feel like that pawn might be a target. And my knight could perhaps come to c5 later, maybe to e6 or even e4, especially if white has played f4. Still got to watch my queen side a little bit, but I think that's fine. And the other line I was originally mentioning is after the trade on d5, white playing e6, really trying to simplify everything. I could just take the pawn at that point, but we would have a mass liquidation. I mean, I wouldn't hate playing that endgame, but I think I can keep a little more tension by playing something like rook f8, maybe even knight f6 there. So let's take with the bishop. White pre-moved their response, so they were expecting that. And now knight d5. It's nice here that white does not have knight e4 because it hangs the pawn on e5. I would play queen takes e5. Okay, so white's going to take. Sometimes knight e4 is a move you have to watch when you bring the knight to d5. Common square for the black knight in the Scandinavian, by the way. It's buttressed by these pawns on e6 and c6. So it's kind of nice that white didn't have that because you do have to watch the d6 square. especially when white's pawn comes to e5. So this is shaping up to be somewhat strategic, it looks to me. We've had some trades. White still needs to complete their development. They need to get the bishop out. e6 looks like one of the more forcing moves here. I don't know that white will actually play that, though. I could see them playing something like, maybe f4, although f4 gives the e4 square, so I'm not sure white wants to commit to that. Maybe queen d3, looking for a queen trade. I could kind of see some micro problems developing here for white, because this pawn could present a nice target. I'm going to put a rook on e8, likely coming up. I think I can deal with this queen b5 move. That is a double attack on these pawns, but I've seen that I have knight b6 at minimum, and I think that's enough for me. I'm also eyeing up the c2 pawn, so I can maybe dabble with something more complicated, like knight takes e5. But seeing that I have knight b6 is enough for me to verify that queen b5 is not a concern. So I'm not 100% sure what I would do here as white. I'm glad they're the one making the decision and not me. I'm going to sip my coffee. Okay, c3. All right, so c3 prevents this whole queen takes c2 thing. However, I have a small window of time where I can think about playing a rook move to attack the pawn. Now, this is a classic dilemma, which rook to put on a certain square of the two rooks that you have. And I think in this case, rook fe8 makes a little more sense. I would only play rook ae8 if I thought the f rook would be useful down the f file. And I don't think f6... Well, I don't know. I say that, I verbalize that, and now I'm second-guessing myself, because I could see after rook ae8, f4, f6 maybe being handy, and potentially the rook on the file could be useful. Maybe. Ultimately, it's probably not that big of a difference, so this is not one of these moves I want to tank for like 2 minutes on. I'm also looking vaguely at if I can take right away, and then rook ae8, there is a back rank issue for white, but it's not working yet. So one of the rooks to e8, and I think that's pretty much all I'm looking at. Yeah, I'm going to play rook fe8. Rook fe8, hit the pawn. And how is white going to reply? Okay, so we induced white to play f4. I think this is a slight victory for me, because two ideas come to mind. One is I can think about knight c5, knight e4, plop the knight into the center. Also, if I want to be a little more aggressive, I mean, I really like to look at this f6 move too. So that may very well be played, f6. So f6, e6, knight c5 hits the pawn again. If e7, maybe then I slam the door and play knight e4. Okay. Yeah, I'm really liking the look of that. Queen b5, there's some activity white has there. So f6, I think, is a pretty dynamic move in this position. Knight c5 is maybe a little more strategic. But I'm kind of sensing the time might be right here to try to play aggressively, because white's a little behind in development. They're blocking their bishop too. Probably the move that most concerns me after f6 is queen b5, which does hit the pawn on d5. White would be threatening to take it with check. Again, I have the knight b6 move. But maybe bishop e3 at that point? Is that something to be concerned about? Bishop e3. Okay, I have c6, though. c6 then coming. Okay, and what about f6, e6? f6, e6. I mean, there, white's not even threatening to take my knight. Ooh, I'm also noticing f6. Maybe I have to give some credence to g4 as a reply. Bit of an unusual move, but g4, and if queen g6, then f5, and white can quickly try to connect these pawns, establish a chain on g4, f5, e6. All right, that's critical as well. But f6, g4, queen e6 seems kind of tidy. And then there's no doubt about the potential danger of queen b5. That would completely backfire for white because of queen takes on g4 with check. You know, I think I've seen enough here to justify f6. I'm going to toss the move back to my opponent. Maybe there's a better way to play this, but we have to assess the risk. and the reward of burning further time on the clock, right? It's always about that. I'd love to sit here and spend maybe an extra couple of minutes fully checking everything, but for my initial check, nothing has hit my radar as being especially troubling for black. It looks like white is taking all the risk here, so let's again put the pressure on my opponent. So at this point, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 attackers on the pawn, and white has 1, 2, 3 defenders. So if a trade were to go down on e5 on the next move, I would win that battle. I would win a pawn. Moreover, white cannot get another defender on this square, right? They don't have their bishop in a position to help out. So white's probably going to be looking to counterattack here. That's why I was spending time on moves like queen b5, g4. A pedestrian developing move like bishop d2, bishop e3 is not going to cut it. White's going to go down a pawn. So I think I have fairly strong conviction that white's going to play one of g4, e6, or queen b5. Maybe queen d2 or queen d1 to attack the d5 pawn, but I think one of those first 3 moves that I mentioned. I know that's a lot of moves, but they all revolve around the same dilemma white has to navigate, which is that e5 is not a holdable pawn right now. Okay, and white plays g4. Yeah, that move is tempting. I saw queen e6. Just looking to see if there's any other moves to consider. Yeah, importantly, queen g6, f5. I mentioned that line, so let's go queen e6. And if f5 now, I can play queen takes e5. That's huge. Before white gets to establish that pawn on f5 and then e6. Okay, this is exciting. The game is sharpening up a little bit. Let me pour some more coffee. I'm thinking I'm working with like half caffeinated, half coffee, and the other half regular. So a little of both. I also haven't played a Scandinavian in quite a while on this channel, so I'm doubly excited. I want to win my Scandi games, right, guys? And let me know in the comments if you play the Scandinavian and which lines you play as well. I'd be really curious because there's lots of branches. There's the queen d8 line I mentioned, queen a5, queen d6. These are all the move 3 options in the Scandi for black. And there's also the modern Scandinavian, which is an entirely different branch. That's e4, d5, e takes d5, and then not queen takes d5, but knight f6, which offers to play into gambit positions. Very interesting as well. Yeah, and I personally mostly preferred the queen takes d5 lines over the course of my career. But knight f6 is also valid. Okay, bishop e3. So it seems like white is just going to give the pawn. They're letting me take here. I wonder if white's idea is going to be f5. I kind of get the sense that that will be the case. And who am I to say no to a pawn here? Let's do it. Yep, an f5. Now, I'm already starting to think if I can play e4, knight e5 at some point in the future, I can use these squares. Okay, but of course now I have to move my queen. I'm just brainstorming where I want this queen. Probably to d6. c6 looks a little awkward as it blocks my c-pawn. Shades of the bad marriage there, guys. On d6, I might be subject to a pin here. I think rook d1 is a pretty natural move for white. But I like the fact that I have c6 kind of supporting the chain thereafter. Yeah, it's really hard to know. I'm just going to use my best judgment here, play queen d6. Keep this defended, keep that defended. I only have one weak point on the board right now, which is b7. But in the event white plays queen b5, they're not even threatening to take on b7 because I would have rook e to b8, which would trap their queen. So we're up a pawn here, and what looks to be a good position to boot. I can build this. I can build around this pawn duo in the center, which I've talked about a lot. For example, if you watch my last video on the Alapin Sicilian, that's with colors reversed, in a totally different situation. I was talking about the importance of this duo. But a lot of the principles apply even here in a middle game. I am not going to be in a hurry to advance one of the pawns if I'm unsure. So although e4 is nice, looking for this and this, I don't have to rush that. Like if I at all feel uncomfortable about that, I'm not going to rush it. So yeah, as expected, white goes here. And I'm kind of thinking this c6 move might just be a nice way to tidy up my position. It rules out queen b5, build some redundancy into my setup. Maybe I could go c5 and d4 as well. That's another option, but yeah, actually c5, if I could pull that off, makes a lot of sense in trying to play e4 and then this, because white would not have bishop d4 as an option, although it would have bishop f4. Okay, so c6, c5, both candidate moves. Maybe e4. e4, I'd have to reckon with queen b5, but then c6. Thing is, e4, knight e5, there's always this bishop f4 move to pin. So I kind of feel like e4 might be premature. Leaning towards c6. Yeah, I'm going to play c6. Over defend the pawn on d5. I admit I have a preference for this type of move. So I wouldn't be shocked if the engine says this is not best, but I also don't think it's going to criticize me very much for it, if that makes sense. Like if this is a mistake, it's a small mistake, as in it keeps a big advantage. It just doesn't prosecute the advantage to the most direct extent. But I'm doing better with my time management this game. This is a 15-15. And lots of options from here. We haven't even really mentioned the king side. So white does have a majority of pawns on that side of the board. I think it should be fairly difficult for white to advance them, though, because I can throw stuff in the way, and the f-pawn becomes weak if white plays g5. Okay, queen f2 played. I don't know that this is really a threat. Again, I kind of doubt it. It seems like a fake threat because b6, or c5, rather. If white played bishop takes a7, c5, cutting off the queen and bishop coordination. But it makes sense. Queen f2 unveils the rook here. Some further pressure on c5. Knight f6 catches my eye here, attacking this pawn. Maybe looking for knight e4. Maybe now I switch it up and go c5. That also catches my eye. I could see that being strong. I could play b6, fully block the bishop. These are all moves I'm considering. e4, I still think bishop f4 will be played. It seems a little unusual to play c6 and then c5, but I wonder if the inclusion of these moves, c6, queen f2, actually benefits that plan. Because white's bishop has a little less scope. Like, it can't drop back to f2 anymore. Might not be a bad plan. Maybe white will go bishop g5, but then I can always shove through d4. Because there is something compelling about putting the pawns on dark squares to restrict white's dark square bishop. It's actually a little hard to say which way to go. Like, strategically speaking, c5, d4, trying to press back against their dark square bishop is appealing. That may run counter to what many of you may think, but that is often a good strategy when facing your opponent's bishop. Tactically speaking, I like e4 and trying to run the knight into f3, but it's a bit of a one-off operation. I think white can play around that, and I give up control of the dark squares if I play that way. So yeah, this is currently leading in my thought process. Just thinking if they try to attack here, what my plan is. Like queen g2 or something. Yeah, this queen g2 might be annoying. I feel like I don't quite have the support that I want there. Maybe I should play a5. a5 is probably a decent move. Just grab a little space. Shut down bishop takes a7. Again, there's this knight g4 move. I'm just not quite so convinced by it. Let's go a5. Play the pawn up. Probably spent a little too much time on that move. But just make sure bishop takes a7 is never an idea. So will white sit here and shuffle their pieces, or will white try to be aggressive with their pawns? I think white should sit. Maybe move the queen again. Don't think they should fiddle with the pawns too much, because again, if something like f5, g5, hoping to advance the f pawn eventually, I do feel like this pawn becomes weaker than white would like. I may just switch gears and play rook f8, rook f7, rook a to f8, pile up against this. Still looking at c5, d4, but I want the circumstances to be a bit more obviously good for me to execute that idea. All right, so still interesting, still competitive here. This feels like it should be a lot better. For me, it feels like it should be a technical win, but that doesn't matter. You still have to concentrate and convert. Many of these things, evaluation-wise, that I'm mentioning, are only relevant after the fact, especially when I'm referencing anything that the computer might think. I'm trying to anticipate what the engine might like here or say about this position, but it's really only for fun. You guys ever think that way sometimes? Like, I wonder if Stockfish would approve of this. It can be a bit of a poisonous mentality, so I wouldn't recommend going down that rabbit hole too often. One concept I've stressed with students is in such positions where you know you're better and you're not sure exactly how to proceed, try to play moves that are easy for you to play and tough for your opponent to respond to. Okay? So white's coming after me here, h4. And that again looks like kind of a committal move. It's getting a little sharper, but I'm not going to panic yet. I don't think this move helps white in any particular way. Maybe they're going to try for h5, h6, but that all remains to be seen. Could be time for this knight f6 move. You know why? Because white can't support it with h3 anymore. So maybe I can try to bait this pawn forward, play knight e4, and let's say queen f3. Now I have to dodge queen takes e4 as a threat, but once I've dodged that, I can start working against that f5 pawn. I wonder if that is an appealing way to play, or if I should just play e4 at this point, or c5, one of those moves. e4 still does make a lot of sense. e4, bishop f4, maybe queen f6. Still looking for knight e5. I somehow feel like that gives white a little bit of leverage, though, against my center. I can think about b5 if I want to stop the whole c4 move. But I'm still going back to knight f6, too. I still like the look of that move. Knight f6, hit the pawn. And try to get that knight into e4 someday. Yeah, it's like, where do I put my queen, though? Would h5 ever make sense? Possibly. Probably not quite yet. But that actually is another idea with knight f6, isn't it? Now that I'm looking at it. Okay, you know what? I think I'm going to play knight f6. Let's do it. We're hitting it with tempo. I think what I mentioned with white being unable to play h3 still holds. So let's see how white reacts to that. Bishop c5, I can just drop my queen back, probably queen d7. Though then g5, I won't have knight e4, so I should be aware of that. So maybe bishop c5, queen c7, also possible. And if bishop e6, maybe I swing over here. And sooner or later, white's going to have to deal with the threat on this pawn. Okay, white does play bishop c5. This is not going to work, this in-between move sequence. White would be up a piece in the end. Yeah, I think I'm going to go here. Let's play this one. And now knight e4 should win an exchange. Or no, it doesn't. Queen e3. White could sack and play bishop d6 as well. I don't know that I have to be fearful of that, but I also like the look of b6 here. b6, bishop d4, then knight e4. Uh-huh. Yeah, I like b6. Establish another pawn on a dark square. Kick out the bishop. Let's do it. See where that bishop goes. Bit of a tough call for white where to put it. You might want to keep it kind of active on this diagonal with bishop a3, but there's a chance it gets shut out with c5. If back to f2, knight e4, always a possibility with a fork. So I guess I would anticipate bishop e3. In which case I have knight e4, I have h5. Bishop d4 runs into knight e4. Very important because there is an alignment here. I could perhaps think about that. I mean, bishop d4, knight e4, queen h2, keeping the pin. Looks like very much a temporary situation, though. I don't really believe in that line for white. I could play c5. I could move my queen e7 or something. I think there's a lot of moves there. Oh, what's up, Neverness? I see you down there. Shout out to Neverness. Neverness, we were wondering where you were because you weren't watching my last standard game. So chat, say hello to Neverness. Or should I say comment section on YouTube, since this is a YouTube video. Okay. So white's doing their best to try to create problems, but I think I've done a good job of maintaining a compact formation. Not showed my hand yet. And I'm hoping to take advantage of some of the weaknesses in white's position. The e4 outpost, this potentially weak g-pawn, maybe press forward with my pawns on dark squares. I think it's becoming less likely I play the e4 move ever, right? Because the queens are in alignment, and my knight is a long ways away from f3. So if I advance in the center, it's probably going to be with d4 at some point. But logistically, I'm still a little ways away from that. Bishop e3 played, okay. So f5 is a little, or h5 rather, is a little tempting. What other moves here? Knight e4, of course. Rook d8, but rook d8, there's bishop g5 with the pin. Kind of need my queen where she's at, guarding b6. Yeah, I could think about c5. I still think that move is a little early. So knight e4. Maybe see where white's queen goes. Maybe knight e4 back to d6. Let's do it. Let's bounce around with the knight. Into the outpost square. Anticipating queen f3. Queen h3 played. Okay. Was not expecting that. So is white really gearing up for g5? I think that is what white's going to try to do. Now, do I get in white's way in trying to achieve that? All right, let's just centralize here. Play rook d8. We'll just play this one. Bishop g5 could maybe be played, arguing that on knight takes, h takes, white has this half-open h file. But okay, as suspected, white goes here. Yeah, now I am happy to see this because I think now I'm justified in switching over to the f file. Playing rook f8. Could also try to charge ahead, but rook f8 to start looks pretty good. Maybe queen d7 coming up, although there's still b6 to worry about. Okay, and there's also c5 and d4. I should keep that in mind too. Maybe now's the time for c5, d4. But now let's play rook f8. Being mindful of time, I'm under 2 minutes. 2-minute drill here. Okay, rook f1. So we both take our rooks off the file. Queen d7, take here. But then I have rook b8, interestingly. So I do a, oh no, my pawn situation. I could bring this knight back to help attack this pawn, but I kind of want to hinder f6. So here, take here. Idea, bishop takes a5, queen a7, picking up the bishop. Queen a7. I think it's plausible white may take that pawn too. So, all right, let's try it. I'm kind of curious how this is going to go. Famous last words, but still feeling very good about this position. So here. Okay, there is queen e3 at that point, but I think queen e3 I take on f5, and I imagine that's quite good for me. But I should have seen that. Take, rook b8, queen e3. I'm only seeing that now. Also, queen e3 enables queen takes e4. That's not so simple. I'd have to be a little careful there. I still think the tactics work out for me, but that's actually tricky. So I wonder if white will try to snap that pawn off. I mean, the nice thing about being up a pawn is if you give back the pawn, it's just an equal game, at least pawn-wise at that point. So even if white could successfully take b6 with no consequence, I wouldn't be panicking. But it did seem to me that white's going to run into problems here. It looks shaky to keep all that together. But maybe white could pull it off. Yeah, bishop takes b6, rook b8, queen e3. Rook takes f5, queen takes e4. Important, I have rook takes f1 with check. Because if white plays rook takes f1, then I take the queen. If king takes f1, I throw in a check, queen f7. It's a lot to visualize. I know I'm not drawing the arrows. But queen f7, and then I can take the queen on the next move. White can't successfully block with their queen safely. Maybe I'll show that line afterwards. For now, let's focus on trying to win this game. Okay, so if white does not take the pawn, what other moves are plausible here? Maybe rook f3, looking to double. Maybe queen f3, trying to escape this pin situation, because I might play g6 if I get the chance. G6 could be a way to capitalize on this. Maybe king g2, trying to defend the queen. I think against a lot of these plans, it might be time to play c5 next, which arguably I should have played on the previous move, but I think the way I'm playing is okay, so long as bishop takes b6 isn't good for white. So I do believe this is critical. Okay, white plays queen f3. Queen played to f3. So now do I go c5? But c5, then there's the c4 move. Yeah, so maybe I should go knight d6. Can't go rook b8. That runs into this. So we need to be aware of this idea. Yeah, I think knight d6 is what I should do here. Attack this pawn. Shut down the whole queen takes e4 operation. Maybe I bounce the knight into c4. Hit the bishop. Attack b2. Defend this. So some ideas going on here. f6 played. Okay. I'm not keen to take there yet. So I think I'm going to play knight c4 in this position. f7's not a big deal. So let's play here. So we're really maneuvering our knight. I would expect bishop c1 probably. And then, I wonder if I can think about coming back to this plan. Okay, white plays that, but that I think should be bad. Knight takes e3, queen g4 coming in. Let's do it. Yeah, queen g4. I think I'm going to pick up at least a pawn with check, maybe more. But let's play this so we give ourselves a maximum amount of time. Probably white should play king f2 here. They're going to lose the h-pawn with check, or I could take here, but probably that should be played. Yeah, they play that one. It's an unfortunate decision to have to make. Still a little messy, though. to be fair. I think I'm going to take this pawn. Because I feel like h4 is going to be weak forever. So let's take this one. Didn't even really calculate this, but it's so far away from white's exposed king, I'm not going to worry about it. I want to get this rook in the action. If I play queen takes h4, I feel like that kind of pushes white's king in the direction it wants to go. I feel like I use that phrase a lot, but that's why I'm holding off on that. I like that my queen guards e2. e1 is a less desirable square for the white king. White may still go there, but I think it is less desirable. Maybe king e1, then queen takes h4. And if king d2, queen takes g5 would run into rook g1. So a little messy still, but... I'm also seeing I have d4. D4 is a nice move to keep in mind. So king e1, maybe pawn d4. Trying to open the e file. Yeah, so I'm firmly on the offensive here, up 2 pawns. A nice geographic pawn formation here. Not over yet, though. Technique must be displayed. Don't see a lot of great moves for white. Rook g1, I'm probably taking here, though I haven't decided yet. There's also f takes g5, of course, but I'm kind of leaning towards the I don't know. I mean, both moves actually look good. Rook g1, f takes g5 would check. King e1, queen takes h4 would check. Yeah, that's got to be winning. King d2, I can play at minimum. Okay, so this is actually going to happen. Yeah, it's a close call. Like, take here first. Again, king e2. There's always queen h2. I think I'm probably going to go with this one, though. Slightly opens my king, but let's just verify. I know I'm under a minute, but the line's so forcing. F takes g5 check, king e1, queen takes h4. Let's say king e2. And I like the fact that I can even play h6 at that point if I really want to. So, yeah, let's go for this. Discovered check. Yep. And now check again. We like doing stuff with check here. Okay, white does play king here, and this might be the cleanest move in this position, guys. Queen f2. Going into an endgame up 4 pawns. Yeah, anything else looks a little less convincing because white gets to keep queens on board. So I'm going to take the 4 pawns up route. And they're all healthy pawns, too. That's nice. No issues with the pawn structure. Now I was thinking rook f5 here. Could also take here, but why even give white the chance to play rook takes g5? There's also this, like trying for a mating net, but it's not quite a mating net. So yeah, rook f5. Nice and tidy. And look at all the squares we control along the rank here. Okay. So again, white is trying to get me to move forward, like stagger my pawns. But I think I'm just going to play h6 in this position. I think I'm just going to tidy up the structure. Just a little improving move. This takes the burden off this rook. Lots of good moves, but this one appeals to me. Yep, let's take back. I think white's going to go rook c1, trying to play for some activity. Yep. Now maybe king g7, get the king up. Looks like a nice tidy move. Rook c6, rook f6. Something like that. Yeah, let's do it. Without white's rooks being coordinated, I should be fine here, but we're still being mindful of potential counterplay. I will probably move these pawns forward at some point, but I'm just taking away that last ounce of counterplay that my opponent may have. Yeah, so let's go rook f6. We love possible trades when we're ahead. Yeah, here I'm thinking of trading, although it does give white that 6 rank to work with. I can almost justify trading and just advancing all my pawns. It's probably actually a pretty compelling way to play. That might be a good technical way to play this, actually. Take, d4 check. Just start advancing those pawns, because I've got these in reserve too. I mean, do I really care that I drop the b pawn? Probably not. I could also play d4 first and just see where white goes with the king. That's definitely a possibility. d4, king e4, trade, d3. Yeah, that should be pretty crushing, I think. Yeah, let's play d4 check. Switch up the move order compared to when I first thought about it. I just want white to reveal their hand. They do play king e4. Yeah, and because they did that, I think it makes it an easier decision to take, because my d-pawn is so fast now. Let's do it. Push. And if white has to go passive, this game is over. I mean, I think the game is basically already over, but yeah, a passive rook when you're down material is the kiss of death in an endgame. So I can improve my position here. King f6, guard the pawn. Looks pretty good. I got the rook behind this pass pawn, so white's just going to get pushed back here. Has to play rook d1 again. Now g4 or rook d4 check. Let's play g4. We'll just push the pawns. G and H. Play h5. King comes back. Let's go g3. And white resigns. Okay. Thanks to my opponent for the game. So, yeah, Scandinavian. I played a little experimentally as far as mainline Scandinavian standards go, putting my queen on f5. I don't know if I like this that much. I think bishop takes d3 is simpler. That's how I've played in the past in this position, but kind of felt in the mood to deviate just a little bit. And wow, I'm noticing that I got to go somewhere in about 5 minutes. Yeah. Thanks to my opponent for the game. This is just a random opponent that I played on Lichess. Yeah, I really got to run here. So analysis gang, I'm sorry. This is going to be a very brief analysis. I think we got to take a brief look at this part of the game, because I do think around f4, f6, I'm starting to get an advantage. And I think white needs something very specific here to avoid being significantly worse. So this might have been a little superficial for white, taking and not planning, not anticipating what was going to happen here. And then I think it kind of comes down to conversion. I feel pretty good. Maybe I could have converted that better, but I feel pretty good. In terms of the raw numbers, sometimes we like to look at the stat. Yeah, I got a 95% accuracy. 4 inaccuracies, 1 mistake, compared to 89% for my opponent. Yeah, 20 average centipawn loss for me. So this bishop d3 move, take a very quick look at the database. Okay, looks like black does play e6 quite a bit. I mentioned c6, but is c6 a mistake because of b4? Huh. Every game in this position has been drawn, but I was worried about b4. Idea of this. And then bishop d2. I just didn't want anything to do with this position. This looked dangerous. There's even bishop c8 ideas coming after this. All right, so I didn't go for that. Yeah, it looks like the opening was fine, even though I perhaps felt some slight discomfort with the queen out here. I had to make sure I don't get trapped. But stuff like knight h4, I can always play queen h5. Yeah, okay, so this is kind of what I suspected. So after d5, c3 is a little too casual. This is where that gets the full question mark. This is where I start to get an edge. Now, it does say rook a e8, so it does actually say that that one's better. And if I had more time, I would really probe as to why that's the case. It's pretty darn close, though. I mean, the engine might even change its mind here. So f6, and what does it say here? Queen b5. Yeah, so wants white to counterattack. Was thinking about knight b6 against that, and now bishop e3. Okay, yeah, this crossed my mind, looking to eliminate the knight and then go after this. I thought maybe c6 here. I guess white probably has enough to hold equality because white is threatening bishop takes b6. And admittedly, if my knight were to move, white can take here. This still looks a little dangerous for white to me. But I see the engine's point. So g4, I mean, it seems harsh, but that gets the double question mark from the engine. Yeah, so, in practice, you need to anticipate these moments before they're there. And I think with c3, white just didn't sense the urgency of what was going on with the e-pawn. And they still have a way out after f6, but it's precise. Only this queen b5, knight b6, bishop e3 operation. Next, after this, as long as I avoid this happening, which would be an utter disaster. Extremely strong pawn here. As long as I avoid that and find queen e6, like something's going to give here for white. Yep, they lost a pawn. Just taking a very brief look at this. I hemmed and hawed about some of these moves. The engine looks like it's suggesting just e4 right away. Okay, doesn't like knight f6. Actually gives that a question mark. It's still looking for e4. Yeah, really debated that. I was unsure how to best play the pawns, and ultimately I just kept the pawns there for pretty much the entire game up until the very end. It's the type of mistake where I'm still better, but I do definitely understand what the engine's saying. Didn't play knight e4 because of queen e3, but the engine still wants to do something related to e4 at the end. Okay, trying to get the queen in. b6. All right. Still stable edge for black. Yeah, now queen d7. Let's see if my calculation, as shoddy as it was here, holds up. Bishop takes b6. I was going to go rook b8 looking for this. As if bishop takes a5, remember, full board vision. Look at your long-range moves, especially the diagonal checks. I win the bishop. And I was looking at this line, queen e3. I can take here. And I think this stands up because if white gets fancy and does this, hoping for some in-between thing, I take here. Rook takes, I take their queen. There's no pin. King takes, I give the check here. This is the line I mentioned. Then I can scoop the queen. White can't save it. So that does seem to check out. That would be in my favor. Yeah. And I was attacking the pawn. I was surprised by b3. I think white should play bishop c1 here. Does suggest that. Then e4. Okay. Yeah, maybe coming back here. Still kind of have to deal with the f6 pawn, though, so it's not completely over yet. Yeah, and this, I think, was an oversight by white. I'm collecting the pawns. Just being careful here. I mean, the rook is aligned with my king, so let's just make sure we're doing stuff with check, trading off. Yeah, and I think this was a pretty easy conversion. d4. King d3, maybe slightly more challenging. I was thinking I could even do this, though. Check, give the pawn, because it's worth it to make white's rook go passive. I've got insurance in the form of these two pawns. This is going to win very much like the game. Okay, so super short analysis. I apologize for the brief analysis there, guys. Feel free to explore this game. It's always linked down below. And let me know what you guys think. Thanks to my opponent again. Seems like a nice player, nice person. Almost everyone I've encountered playing online is nice, except for those occasional cheaters. But fortunately, we haven't encountered them for a while. Shout out to Neverness. And yeah, let me know what you guys think or if you have any questions. So this was TeamScandi signing off. See you guys. Hope you're having a good week.